John, Pamela, Larry, Ken.
Well, I don't know which came first, Whistler's part in what I've done or what my family was doing before I became Member of Parliament. But our effort to create a higher level of national health and fitness was a real emphasis on preemptive health care, on participation. We know that some 93% of children around the country don't even get 6 hours a week of healthy physical activity. No one at Whistler needs to learn more about that, but Whistler is able to teach the rest of the country how to do it, and that's been a big part of my role as a Member of Parliament. You've heard about the National Health and Fitness Day, which we created. By the way, very inclusive. All parties voted for that. Just like the crystal meth bill that I brought in, that was one of 5 bills that passed in 4 years among private members. Very inclusive. Child's tax credit is an important part of the Conservative commitment to this, $500 per child, which encourages families to get out there and get their kids active, as opposed to creating a national agency. A different approach from some of my opponents would be to create a large child care agency, which would basically be the hiring of lots and lots of people, the use of our tax dollars in order to hire government employees, as opposed to giving parents the option to do what they do best, which is be parents. In terms of the future, I continue to promote national health and fitness in the things that I do. I'm the co-chair of the Parliamentary Caucus on Substance Abuse. I'm very involved in the recovery movement in helping families where there is somebody dependent. There's some say 1 in 5 Canadians who have a dependency issue. So that's a big part of my work.
Thank you for the question, Ralph. Families and children are at the center of our entire strategy. Our Child Canada benefit is cash, tax-free, $6,500, which is different from the current amount that is taxed that was just issued. Of course, in a place like West Vancouver, sports is central, and you can take a look at the things that we accomplished when I was mayor, our artificial turf fields at the entrance, of course, and our award-winning community center. But more importantly, we partnered with families to provide that, and we partnered with the province to refurbish existing municipal spaces for childcare. This has nothing to do with government workers. It's everything to do with listening to the needs of parents and allowing them to lead with regard to what they need for their children. I'm very proud of that because we were behind in West Vancouver. And just to say, I'm sure you may not be aware of the Educational Development Index, but Lions Bay, Bowen, and get back to that, because it's very important about the children who are suffering in our riding.
Well, first of all, on the personal, as I mentioned in my introductory remarks, I've been working with people with disabilities and the business community for most of my career. There's been some great program initiatives too, and the Business Leadership Network program was something that I'd love to explore with the Whistler business community here. It's bridging the gap between the business community and finding qualified individuals in both the disability community, the immigration community, the new immigrant community, and the First Nations community. It supports employers, it's a recruiting tool, it's something that I'm committed to, and I have experience doing that. And it's a wonderful bridging gap working with business and community. On childcare, you mentioned, we do believe that a national childcare program is in the best interest of Canadians, families, and women. Toronto Dominion Bank did a research. For every dollar spent, there's $1.49 to $2.78 return on investment.
So many things we got done. Hey, Ralph. We built daycares, we built parks, one of the best trail systems in the world, best transit systems in BC, youth center in this building. We built schools, we built affordable housing. so many things, yet there's always more to do, and it's a real struggle for families because personal debt in Canada is higher than it's ever been. What will the Green Party do? We've got some really exciting programs. We have a commitment to national childcare. Really cool is a tax incentive for in-work childcare. So many families who have to go to work, it's difficult to drop off the kids. So in-home childcare. Abolish tuition for university education and capping student debt will help our young people fulfill their potential. And dental program for low-income youth in Canada under the age of 18 for the first time in Canada's history. This is important to getting our health in order and to reducing costs on our Medicare system.
Hard to argue with somebody who will promise the moon and not be able to necessarily tell you where the money's going to come from. The key thing to remember is that there's one taxpayer, that we are all those who are paying for the programs that are being promised. So this is a government that can tell you that there's $6,600 more in the hands of a family of 4 than there would have been under a previous government. This is a government which has created 160 tax cuts, which have left us with the lowest federal tax burden since over 50 years ago. So this is a government that expects us Canadians to do the right thing. Meanwhile, investing intelligently in infrastructure, creating an economy where 1.3 million people have jobs so they can go home and feed their families and take care of their children and send their kids to the kind of sports programs that we love here at Whistler.
So we're going to have time for 3 more questions. So I'm going to apologize to those who get cut out, but that's all the time. Go.
Hi, my name's Emily Mann, and I have a question for John. John, I'm deeply concerned about many of the Harper government's policies and actions, but I'd like to ask you a question tonight on what has been described as a serial abuse of power on the part of the Prime Minister of Canada, Stephen Harper. The accounts of bully-like behavior and anti-democratic practices are numerous and diverse, from refusing to disclose information about government spending, to pushing through omnibus bills, to decimating federal libraries and public records, to undermining Parliament through illegitimate prorogation. The list is very, very long. John, I never thought as a Canadian I would need to stand up in front of my elected official and express that I'm fearful of the rapid erosion.
So I'm going to ask for the question.
I'll get to the question. Democracy in the country.
In 8 seconds, you'll get to the question, please.
My question to you is this. Do you feel like democracy in Canada is intact? And if so, why are there so many well-documented factual accounts of anti-democratic practices and abuse of power in the Conservative government?
So the answering order is John, Ken, Pam, and then Larry. John.
Well, I'm glad that you asked the question because it comes up, and I do believe that we do have a great country. We have a great democracy. You know, I'm a constitutional lawyer. I worked on bringing the Constitution back when I was a Harvard student working for BC government, and then for the government of Quebec under René Lévesque. I created the Canadian Constitution Foundation, which stands up for individual Canadian rights when governments menace those rights. So I too care very much about these things. I've already mentioned my record as a parliamentarian. You know, there's people who say, oh, MPs, well, they don't have the freedom to act in our parliament. Well, I've demonstrated again and again that's not the case. And any MP with backbone, a Conservative MP with backbone, is free to do the kinds of things that we've seen accomplished on behalf of this riding, whether it's in terms of standing up against the government in the House or getting things done behind closed doors, which represent our values that relate to fisheries, the environment, salmon, and the waters, things that I have raised on time and time again, and things where we have accomplished great things. When it comes to Bill C-51, I don't know if you mentioned it, but that's often brought up in this same discussion. You know, our intelligence agency, CSIS, was created in 1982, and it hasn't been updated since then. Since then, we have the explosion of the internet as a form for communication. And we have people traveling abroad wanting to join terrorist organizations. I've read the bill. It's 40-plus pages. You can read it too. And if you compare it to what other countries have, like Finland and France and Australia and other countries which we consider proud democracies, we have judicial oversight where the interruption of digital communications is required, where the other countries require political oversight. It is a prudent bill. It's a bill whose time was necessary, and it's one that makes sense.
So two things. It's going to go Ken, Pamela, Larry. Second thing is we like to listen here, right? We ask the question, we listen to the answer. So settle.
Thank you.
Ken.
I think, thanks for that question, Emily. You really hit a nerve with people in Canada. I believe that Harper will pay for his arrogance. But if the Conservative Party somehow manages to fluke out a minority government, Harper has said he will step down. And I will state here that the best chance to rescue our democracy in politics is to elect enough Greens that we can form a coalition with one of the other parties and take down a Conservative government should they manage to fluke this out. If we don't get enough Greens, I'm going to lead the march to Parliament Hill and insist that the Liberals and the New Democrats work together. Not how they learned the lesson. I think we all learned the lesson from 2005 when we could have prevented this Harper majority. I will lead the march to Parliament. We will demand a coalition government that works for Canadians and take back our democracy from politics.
Even Justin Trudeau has said the centralization in the Prime Minister's office that began with my father ends here. Stephen Harper has concentrated power when he won by building on the Gomery Commission, which pointed out that there was way too much centralization of power in the Prime Minister's office, and said he would not do that, and then he expanded the budget by 38%. My report on business article that I have in front of me says there was not much of an economic plan, just a political plan. Communications have all become marketing. Kevin Page left and wrote a book called Unaccountable. I congratulate your government on appointing Kevin Page. I don't think it was your intent that he would become the conscience of the country, but he's done us all a great service. Thank you.
I will try to answer your question, and it's about democracy in our parliament, which has been eroded. I've had the opportunity to speak with my New Democratic colleagues, Paul Dewar and Megan Leslie, about this, and the extreme frustration that they tell me about is the inability for committees to work together. And I'll give credit to the Liberal Party. Under the Liberals, under Jean Chrétien and others, bills you could work together in committees. In fact, 75% of all legislation in committee there was amendments made under the Liberals, and that's the kind of parliament that we need to get back to. It is something that has been lost right now, and we need cooperation, collaboration, and find out what's best for this country and not what's best for our political parties.
I think when you represent an accomplished group of people like the people in our riding, you have to stand up and act with backbone, and you have to act independently. That is possible in our parliament. I've demonstrated it time and time again. I was the first Canadian MP to visit Iraq in the modern era. Prime Minister's office, was it happy? Wasn't that happy. There were risks. You had to wear the bulletproof vests. You had to have the armed escorts everywhere you went. Crystal meth bill. You know how I got that passed in a fractured minority parliament? I went to the justice critics and asked for their input, and I took out the mandatory minimum sentence, which was against the run of play on the Conservative side. We got the bill passed, and we now have a bill that protects kids by taking down crystal meth labs. Abandoned vessels. I voted with my colleagues, the NDP, and against my party because that's something that really meant a lot to our riding. Yes, it happens, and it happens when you got backbone in this parliament under this prime minister.
So our last question from this side, and then will be our last question from that side. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Al Whitney. My interest is in science, and my question is to John. John, during the last half dozen years, the National Research Council has been turned over. It's become a development organization. Funding to universities in science have been cut drastically. A large number of scientists within the Department of the Environment have lost their jobs. We've lost records, which that makes no sense at all. It didn't save any money to those records, but we've lost records as if that was going to be something that we would come back again. And I think most people in British Columbia, including a lot of people in this room, regret that. What I want to ask you is, where did you stand on each of those issues? On fisheries, on cutting of science, and cutting of the changing of the National Research Council? Where did you personally stand? And if you stood with those things, I think we have a right to know that. If you in fact stood against them, I'd be very interested to know how you made yourself clear to Mr. Harper.
Great. Thank you for the question. So after John, it'll be Larry, then Ken, then Pamela.
You know, as somebody who has been blessed with a great education, when I hear these things, it really hurts. And it doesn't hurt necessarily because it's accurate. It hurts because of the reputation that goes along with that. You know, I just have independently investigated with scientists. I've been on the Fisheries Committee almost from the get-go. I've made a point of being there because it's so critical to our riding. I have worked with scientists. I've asked them their views, and they say that they are totally free to work with the forum of scientists around the world. Now, it's true that under a ministry, just like under a corporate enterprise, not everybody is free to say what they want every day. There is generally a spokesperson, but there is a very free flow of science going on. We have one of the most ambitious experiments. Dr. Kerry Miller is working on investigating 30,000 fish, looking at 5 different tissue areas to look at the transfer of pathogens in aquaculture. That's why I worked to make sure that our government did not convey away the laboratory at DFO, or DFO's laboratory in West Vancouver, where we have great scientists, but where we can do way more. That's why I made sure that our Fisheries Committee did a report on aquaculture, and we got a unanimous recommendation to create a closed containment center for excellence. That's why I went to bat for the Pacific Salmon Foundation, and we got funding in Budget 2015 to explore Georgia Strait, where the salmon are going. I believe that we have some of the greatest scientists, and furthermore, you know, we've grown from 130,000 scientists back in 2005 to people who depend on the environment for their work to 730,000. These are scientists, these are people in the environmental field that make us world leaders in science and the environment and in fisheries.
We might have been world leaders, but we are no longer world leaders. And you're exactly right in your comments and your observations. Yes, the Navigable Waters Act has been eroded, gutted. The Fisheries Act, the Species at Risk Act, and our Environmental Assessment Act are gone. We need to restore the Navigable Waters Act, strengthen and reinstate the Environmental Assessment Act, and give the Fisheries Act the powers that have been stripped away. Thank you.
For those that are interested, our fully costed budget is online, real easy to find at greenparty.ca. Every dollar that I've talked about tonight is fully accounted for. Specifically to your point, yes, scientists have been muzzled. One of the pieces of legislation we'll bring in is the requirement that all scientific research be made public, no matter whether the government thinks it's useful or not, serves their purpose. We will restore scientific capacity to the federal government. It has been, and the morale within the scientific community and federal government, if there's any scientists left, is extremely low. Two other things we're going to do is cancel federal support for Atomic Energy Canada and stop federally funded GMO research. We need to get scientists working on productive things for Canada. So we have, again, I'm very proud to be running alongside some very strong scientists within our Strong Green team here from BC who are absolutely committed to restoring science as a component of good policy and making decisions Canadians are interested in. Thank you.
Right, okay. Thank you. Where is the Cohen Commission? I've worked really hard with the very people that our MP has worked with in order to bring that back into the light of day and ensure that it's in our platform and continue to build on its 95 recommendations. And we're working with the same people. So obviously there's a problem and there's hope for the future. That omnibus bill, Bill C-38, gutted multiple acts that had environmental legislation in it that we believed in, particularly the Fisheries Act. Think of how many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours volunteers give in our riding for our streams and creeks and foreshore areas, only to have the word habitat taken out of the Fisheries Act. It's unconscionable. Parliament Hill saw scientists marching not to assert their rights, to assert their obligation toward academic freedom. It'll be good to have them back again.
Well, one thing I can agree with Pam on is the huge commitment of volunteers, some of whom are in the room today. I've worked with in our Fisheries Advisory Group, and in fact, we called upon the government to create the Cohen Commission. And the recommendations are 75. No, they haven't all been implemented. Many have, and they govern what the government does in the fisheries side. Habitat is very much part of the Fisheries Act, and in fact, there's a focus on Aboriginal, commercial, and recreational fisheries. That's where, for the first time in history, we are protecting habitat. The libraries, they weren't just destroyed, the libraries were changed from paper to digital form, and there was this myth that the documents were all destroyed. In fact, I've looked into it, and out of 780 requests for interviews with scientists in the last 2 years, 680 were granted. My dream is to create an international center of excellence for fisheries and science in our riding through that laboratory that I've helped save.
Thank you for your patience. Question.
Hi, my name is Jade Quinn McDonald, and not that I'll be voting, but my question today is directed to Ken Melamed. I was just wondering what your stance is on the Trans-Pacific Partnership that the government is trying to push through.
So, Ken, John, Pamela, Larry.
Thank you very much. There are not many people as young as you that know about the Trans-Pacific. In fact, there's a lot of Canadians older than you that don't know about it. And this is an important issue that not enough Canadians know about. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's because the Harper government has brought in most of the investor-state trade agreements in the middle of the night when nobody was trying to look. The Green Party is categorically opposed to any investor-state trade agreements. Trade is good. Canada is a trading country. We can have trade without the undemocratic, sovereignty-losing conditions or attachments that are made to these trade agreements, which are the investor-state trade deals. It is really quite shocking what the Harper government has done from, actually the Liberal government finalized Chapter 11, the very first global international trade deal. And now we've moved into the Canada-China Act where we can't get out for 15 years to start and then possibly renewable for another few decades. We need to get out of them. We can have trade without. All of the other three parties support investor-state trade agreements. The Green Party stands apart. As I've said, there are so many ways that we are unique. We are a fresh voice with big ideas, prepared to challenge the status quo. And the other parties are all in favor of investor-state trade agreements. In fact, the NDP caucus, 100% compliance with Mr. Mulcair's direction, voted against party policy to support the Canada-Korea Free Trade Agreement. This is the kind of government you'd expect from business as usual. Let's try something different, folks, because the definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. I don't mean to say that you're insane. It's just a reflection about what we're doing. Check yourself at the ballot.
Ken still had time to go.
Yeah, it was 20 seconds. I knew that.
You can call us insane in your rebuttal, Ken. Thank you for the question. We're Canadians. We trade. That's how we make our money in the world. That's how we sell our goods and sell our services. There's no other party in history that has promoted free trade as strongly, effectively, and successfully as the Conservative Party. In the years since 2006, we've gone from 4 countries with which we have free trade to 44 countries. That doesn't just mean that there's a record of hundreds of millions of people with whom Canadians can now trade more freely. It also means that the government has built the capacity to negotiate these things. So the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade with Asia, I think it's 800 million people who would be involved with that, is an enormous opportunity for Canada. Having lived and worked in Asia for a decade, I can say that we need to be there. And by the way, the Harper government has done so well in balancing China and Taiwan, something that was difficult. No one expected it, and it was done very, very well.
I applaud the energy and enthusiasm and ideas of everybody on this stage. I mean, I think that this is exciting for October 19th. Just to go to a little bit higher level, the challenge with this trade agreement is that we are living in a time where there's a chill on things. Government should be open by default. The questions Canadians ask are legitimate. The interests that people have are legitimate. People feel shut out. And that's why it's difficult to extend trust to some of the very important things, particularly with trade agreements, that go on. So I think we need to move to a more open, accountable, honest, forthright style of government, which is not to say that this is going to be a radical change. It's an approach, and it's difficult to campaign on an approach, but I feel it's what Canadians are looking for.
Well, in any trade deal, first you have to ask the fundamental question: is it fair trade? And does it benefit working Canadians and families, and just not multinational corporations? This is the key to any investment strategy. Also, recognizing that any trade agreement, there will be gains and there will be concessions. But the important thing to examine, what is the net comprehensive gain to Canada? Under the TPP, it's a secretive negotiation. So how can you support it? How can you go against it unless you know what's in it? There are serious things in that trade agreement that affect our supply management system, which employs thousands of Canadians in the dairy industry. There's negative effects to the auto sector. These things are of great concern to us, and we cannot trade our nation away for the multinationals. Thank you.
One of the horrifying things about the Trans-Pacific Partnership, because culture was brought up earlier, it has the threat to impact our crown corporations and the provision of many public services that are currently provided in Canada. We can't keep selling off our sovereignty. When we implement the Council of Canadian Governments, we can also find a way to protect local governments. One of my great frustrations as a mayor was to sit there and go to UBCM, Union of BC Municipalities, and Federation of Canadian Municipalities, only to hear that our local government rights to decision making were going to be stripped from us in these international trade deals. The organizations fought them over and over, but we always lost because the federal governments successive federal governments in Canada have championed these deals. I challenge my colleagues to answer the straight question: do you or do you not support investor-state trade agreements?
So thank you, everybody, for the fantastic questions, and thank you, candidates, for fielding all that as well as you did. So thank you very much for... That was really well done, all. We're the format for the close now. Each candidate will give a 2-minute wrap speech. It will be done in the reverse order from where it was drawn, so we'll start Larry, Pamela, John, and then finish with Ken. And if we're ready to go, are we good? No, perfect.
We're good to go. Climate change is something that we're all concerned about, the negative effects of climate change. And one of the disappointing things that happened in the Senate was Jack Layton introduced this is a few years ago, introduced the Climate Change Accountability Act, which was voted in Parliament and went to the Senate to be defeated by the Senate. This would have had huge impact on our environmental regulations and how we treat the environment. So on that matter, I'm proud to be part of Tom Mulcair's team of New Democrats. And again, we're proposing a national child care program where women, families, and workers will benefit from this. The increase to tourism, I think, is extremely important in this region of the world. It helps my business, and I think it's a growth industry and something that needs to be supported more. And we need to tackle climate change with a practical plan. As I mentioned, I care deeply about environmental change, climate change, and what kind of world will we be leaving to future generations. We need to build a balanced economy, a diversified economy that is built on a long-term sustainable growth strategy. You might have guessed by now that no party here has all the answers. And no candidate, none of us have all the answers. But it's time to elect a candidate who can work with others, who can work well with others. A candidate who is committed to a collaborative, a cooperative approach to finding solutions. And I believe that I am that person. I'm asking for your support, and I'm asking for your vote on October 19th. Thank you for participating in a democratic process. Thank you, Whistler.
I'd like to talk about how we've enjoyed this campaign together. We have held 17 democracy talks wide open to everybody, and I know for sure people who are interested in each of our 4 parties have been there. In fact, Ken's campaign manager was handing out materials at the last one in Pemberton, and I totally welcome that. I think that's where we're going in the future of Canada. We began here in Whistler with Douglas Copeland talking about the cultural economy. That's the kind of person who's stepping up. We finished last week in Pemberton on collaborative leadership hosted by Maureen Douglas, who many of you may know from Communications at 2010. Another example of who is stepping up to create a more open, accountable, honest, inclusive government. I'm an optimistic person and I'm a pragmatic person. We have worked well together, ironically, all 3 of us, and it's interesting to be in this position today. This is not at all personal. It is about building a Canada that can reach its full potential and kicking our eyes up off the dashboard and looking out 50 years for a more sustainable, inclusive, and tolerant society. It is about restoring Canada's role in the world, which has been severely diminished, and which people, most of all, I think others outside of our country, wish for us to reclaim on our behalf and, of course, on theirs as a moderate middle power. Canada governs best from the middle. It does not do well when hard lines are drawn. This election campaign, I didn't mean to look at one person. Sorry. I have built bridges for 20 years, and I would like to join with you in contributing our riding to Canada and Canada to our riding. I'm asking for your vote to bring inclusion, experience, and balance to Canada for all. Thank you so much for this evening.
Thank you for an extraordinary evening. There is a real distinction between the other candidates up here and myself. On the one hand, the Conservative Party believes in building from a strong economy. We believe in keeping taxes low. We don't believe in excessive and wild and unruly spending. We believe that the taxpayer is one, and it's the taxpayer who has to support all of the promises that you have heard and will continue to hear from the other parties. This is a party that has consistently lowered taxes so that people will invest in Canada, our Canada. That's why organizations like the Reputation Institute, which surveyed over 30,000 people in G7 countries, have found Canada to be #1 in 4 of the last 6 years in terms of people's satisfaction with the economy and the environment. Accenture, another organization that has surveyed 138 countries, puts us #14. We're not where we'd like to be, where Norway is in #1, but we're way ahead of the United States, and we still have some work to build on. But clearly, we are living in a country that is doing better than others, the best debt to GDP ratio in the G7. In terms of budgets, we heard things like 300,000 jobs lost. Well, my colleague doesn't understand the word net. We have created 1.3 million new jobs. That means probably 1.6 or 1.7 million jobs, 1.3 million net new jobs. I'm a firm believer in projects that add value, that can spur our economy, and can be assessed in an independent, science-driven, and objective way. I have a strong personal record to keep going, and that's why I'm asking for you to vote for me on October 19th. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. We've heard from the other candidates who are all nice people and deeply committed to what they're doing. The system isn't so nice, and we need to rescue democracy from politics. These candidates only want to press play on politics as usual. I will take your voice to Ottawa, loud and clear, not bring some party leader's voice here. Vote for me to amplify your voice in Ottawa, jumpstart our economy, and strengthen our communities across this beautiful riding. Ms. Goldsmith-Jones will not be able to change the archaic Liberal Party or make it take real action on climate change. Will the Liberal Party protect our coast from big oil? No way. The shattered party always has and always will serve the oil and gas sector in priority over Canadians' commitment to our environment. The Liberals won't repeal Bill C-51, which they've supported despite the sage opposition of former prime ministers and court justices who stated that C-51 results not only in devastating personal consequences for individuals, but a profoundly negative impact on Canada's reputation as a rights-respecting nation. Mr. Koopman, despite his personal misgivings, will not be able to stand up to Tom Mulcair and stop LNG tankers in Howe Sound. He will be forced to toe the party line because Mulcair doesn't care about the coast as much as he cares about winning seats in central Canada. And Mr. Weston, his record speaks loud and clear. I say no more. In this election, you can do more with your vote. Change government. Give strength to the one party with the fresh new voice and big ideas. Feel good about your vote. Do more with your vote. On October 19th, vote Green for a Canada that works together. Thank you very much.
The candidates will be sticking around to rebut anything that they said. So if you want to talk to them, I'm sure none of them are going to run away. Can you hang for a couple of minutes? Please, thanks. Thank you for participating in tonight's All Candidates meeting. It's an important election. Please ensure you cast your vote on Monday, October 19th. The polling station's at the Whistler Conference Centre, and the polls are open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Now I'm just going to hand it over to Val. We got to thank some people, and then you can go.
Perfect. Thank you, Dave. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank our candidates. I don't know about you, but that was much more comprehensible than some of the national televised debates I've been viewing. So thank you. And I have a feeling it has something to do with Dave Davenport. So maybe, Dave, you have a career moderating national debates. Thank you to Dave. It's not an easy job, and you handled that very deftly, so thank you so much. I would like to thank our partners, the Whistler Arts Council, the Whistler Question, and of course Peak Magazine. And last of all, thank all of you for coming out and actually having a cogent, intelligent political conversation. We need more of us, and how inspiring. I don't know if that young woman is still in the audience, but my goodness, if she could bring more of her friends next time. That was a pretty special moment. So thank you to all of you, and thank you to our candidates.